Top Med Talk.
Monty Mython here. As we prepare to move into the next phase of the COVID crisis, we're going to be widening our focus here on Top Med Talk. We will continue to deliver COVID-specific programs, but we all have a huge additional responsibility as we try to reboot normal services. So although this piece is not directly related to COVID-19, we believe it's information that is crucial to the bigger task of rebuilding the healthcare system as we learn to adapt and live with this new virus. Thank you to our sponsors and to you, our listeners, for helping us to share this important information.
Hello, I'm Desiree Chappell, and this is Top Med Talk. We are here in Orlando, Florida for Anesthesiology 2019, the annual meeting of the American Society of Anesthesiologists. With over 14,000 delegates, this is the largest meeting of anesthesiologists and anesthesia providers in the world. Now, I'm usually joined by co-host, either Monty Mython, our editor-in-chief, is here, but he is presenting here at the ASA this afternoon. And Saul Aronson has been helping me out today, too. But I'm really excited to sit down and talk with Neil Fleming from UC Davis. So he's sitting here with us. Neil, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah,
Very nice.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Currently California, so UC Davis. Well, the hospital's in Sacramento, so Northern California. Been there, this is 30 years. So
oh, wow.
It was my first day job when I finished training back east. Came out to California, and kids all grew up there, and grandkids are close by. So
If the shoe fits,
it works.
It's working. And what type of anesthesia do you practice?
Primarily cardiovascular thoracic surgery. So I'm currently recovering director of the section. I've retired
I was like, recovering from what?
I have turned it over to the next generation, and now I'm just watching and taking a deep breath.
Yeah.
So primarily cardiac, vascular, thoracic type cases, major vascular stuff. About half the time in the OR, half the time teaching.
Oh, that's good.
So it's a nice balance.
Yeah,
it's good.
Definitely. Well, Neil, we've been talking a lot about on Top Med Talk. We talk a lot about technology, and specifically about AI and artificial intelligence and how that's kind of creeping into our practice, right? So you've been in practice for 30 years.
I think I'm a bit of a sucker for technology.
Oh.
I think maybe that's what sucked me into cardiac. And I mean, there's ultrasound, and there's swans, and there's all the toys and tools and the monitors. And I think I've always been interested in learning how I can gain more information and better guide what I'm doing and try and make a difference. So I think that maybe word is out to the reps that I have a really low threshold for trying new stuff. And so I think that's always been the case.
Yeah. So early adopter.
I think that you can graph early adopters, and then there's some people off to the side.
Innovators.
Sounds like you're a little
sucker for,
north of that.
I'm afraid so.
I think early adopter doesn't call it, right?
I will confess to that.
That's okay. We need you. We need people like that to test the waters, right?
I break things.
Yeah. So from your vantage, which is leaning over the edge, first to jump, what does it look like from that vantage point if you had a crystal ball?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of stuff with the physiologic monitoring stuff, so the stuff that Ed was coming out. But the other big world is the neuro-monitoring, being able to process an EEG waveform. I mean, if you told me 2 years ago that I was going to be able to understand an EEG waveform, I would have laughed at you. But this new technology and processing that's coming in for that, it's like, gosh, that almost feels like home. And so the ability to process that whole chunk of information, I think, is a huge change.
You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, just the DSA and the different displays for the EEG monitoring and just breaking the ice and being able to convince an anesthesiologist that it's worth looking at those squiggly lines. I think that's pretty impressive change that's happened. Yeah. I don't know. Do you routinely use EEG monitoring intraoperative now?
Not since my fellowship.
Well, the crazy thing is that, we did it in fellowship, and it went away because it was too scary, and they were flipping all those switches. Yeah. And now you just stick the stickers on the forehead, and you're looking at these things again.
So my question is, okay, so you have all this predictive analytic, and you have all these tools, right? And some of them, some of them are just okay, but some of them can, change our practice because we have new tools in the toolbox and new ways to manage. How do you convince people to, one, take a look at it, Because,
Yeah.
I mean, I know the providers I work with, nobody really wants to, they don't have an interest in it. But two, once they look at it, like, how do you get them to get on board with it and actually start utilizing it as a tool in their toolbox, not just something
Yeah,
you're
I
telling
don't
them
know.
they need to use?
I think it varies a lot depending on the technology. Some I think is more intimidating than others, but I think the key thing is if you bring something new in, you have to be able to convince them that it makes a difference.
So I'm going to just challenge that and ask you to go a step further. So I agree. I mean, data is what drives and initiates any change.
Yeah.
I have an expression. I think I've used it only 100 times so far today. But between data and change is reality. And reality, to your point about change management, which is really a wonderfully complex, if you will, science, reality to me is trust, emotion, culture, and it has to be easy to use. And so though data is the driving force, change is predicated on reality, and reality is trust, culture, emotion, and easy to use. Do you agree?
I think that's a huge part of it. Just that basic interface between the anesthesiologist and the system, I think is a critical piece of it that's often overlooked.
Well, just like as you were saying, I mean, what made me think about this the most is when you said, oh, so now I now have the process to EEG in front of me, and it's giving me numbers, where before I didn't want to look at the squiggly lines.
Yeah.
So, okay, now I have this information. What am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you get that change to happen?
Well, I think a part of it, like you say, is it has to be easily acquired. And then I think it's really important to show that, well, you have to bridge from what they currently know and see how it builds on their foundation, and then be able to show that it makes a difference somehow. Or at least show how it could make a difference. Because I think a lot of it, it's hard to say that if you put this on your patient, they're going to have a better 30-day survival. And I'm thinking, I just want them to get the pancreas out. I really don't care about 30 days from now. And so sometimes it's hard to make that jump. But you have to give them data or information that can convince them that, it's reasonable to assume that it will make a difference.
So when you're ready, when you have tested out new products, new technology, and you want to put it into your practice, I mean, it's one thing for you to do it. What are you doing to bring colleagues on board? Is that something that you do routinely? I mean, you were director of your department for a while, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were you doing in that respect?
I think it varies depending upon on what it is. Sometimes you can just say, we're going to do this.
Yeah, and it's a mandate.
And you just do it. And then it becomes a routine, and then you learn from the routine. For example, we decided that we would routinely do thromboelastograms on all our cardiac patients, just because it was easy just to do it all the same.
Yeah.
And in the course of doing that, we then learned how to use the systems and how to apply the data, and it kind of came secondary to it, and now it's like a routine adoption sort of thing.
What's the next TEG?
I honestly think probably the closest thing is probably the H.P.I. and the predictive analytics with H.P.I.
Yeah. For our listeners, what does H.P.I. stand for?
H.P.I. is Hypotension Prediction Index.
Okay.
So it is an algorithm that's been developed that will basically, it's a number ranging from 1 to 100. It is the chances that within the next 5 minutes, the mean arterial pressure will be less than currently an arbitrary value of 65. So it provides advanced warning of impending hypotension, and then the system provides additional parameters that kind of tease out potential reasons for that impending change, and allows you to select your appropriate therapy.
How are you using that tool in your practice?
What happens with something like this is it's new and it's novel, and you have to poke at it, and I think you do have to go through a number of phases or stages before you really adopt what's going on. Personally, I think because of a proximity to Irvine and a reputation that had been developed for breaking and trying new things, we saw H.P.I. relatively early.
Okay.
And it's been kind of interesting because I looked at it and once I got through the convincing that it was good, I have gone through a process of trying just to see what happens, what other people think.
Like organically, kind of just seeing it.
Yeah.
So I'm asking it in a little bit different context. Just give me a day at the office. Like, how do you use it? If you could describe your user case scenario, walk us through a day in the OR.
So most of what I'm doing in the OR, I mean, I have the privilege of, I'm usually working with a resident or a CRNA, running. I mean, more times than not, it's going to be either a major vascular or thoracic case. So
high risk.
Relatively high risk, relatively complicated, and we have the luxury of being at a university hospital, so I have no time pressure. I know that I'm going to be able to enjoy the duration of the surgical procedure.
I'm sure the CEO is not listening.
No, they're not. They're not. The surgeons aren't listening either. But so during the course of that, I'm trying to figure out how am I going to take care of the patient, and then also what am I going to teach the resident or the nurse in terms of general education. So I pretty consistently have a two-pronged set of priorities. And so if we're doing a case that makes sense, a major vascular case, we're going to do intra-arterial monitoring. We'll spend a fair chunk of time talking about options for monitoring and stuff like that. And these days I will pretty routinely pull in an H.P.I system, and we'll talk about kind of how it's working, what it's telling us. And it's a wonderful opportunity basically to relive physiology.
Yeah.
How has it changed your practice?
The key thing is that it extends the therapeutic options beyond just giving more volume, provides additional guidance, and frankly gets you working towards a solution before the problem occurs pretty consistently.
For the technology, is it something that is, is it like a plug and play kind of thing, or is it like, what's technology look like? Because that's what it's ease of use. How does it work? I mean,
the ease of use. I mean, the ease of use is it's a different pressure transducer, and plugging into a monitor with appropriate software. To be honest, though, in terms of ease of use, it presents some relatively complicated. It's a lot more information.
Yeah, it's more information.
It's a lot more information, and that's part of the problem with the adoption or learning is that you present folks with
more information, whether or not you need to know it.
Well, it's the stuff that we didn't learn in medical school.
Yeah. How do you manage to that? What you say, information dose. How do you filter? How do you build your own internal algorithms to practice in a pragmatic way, given that bolus of data information?
I think it's important, at least with something like this that comes in with so many new things, is to make sure you have a good foundation. So in our institution, we were pretty early adopters of the whole concepts of dynamic monitors as guide to fluid management and arterial pressure-based measurement of cardiac output, and using things like stroke volume variation to guide intraoperative fluid management, and trusting the cardiac output numbers that you get from arterial pressure monitoring. So you need that foundation first. And I don't know where things are for you guys in that whole world, but I think that's a key starting point. And unless you do that, you can't run. Yeah. That's the walking part.
I mean, I think advanced hemodynamic monitoring and utilizing hemodynamic parameters are starting to become definitely more mainstream.
You see, I don't know, because what I realized is...
I go around to a lot of places. I mean, it's definitely becoming more mainstream. Yeah. But I think one point, though, that I think that you made earlier is that no matter what it is, when you're utilizing these new things, it is a learning opportunity and a teaching opportunity. For those that understand it have to teach those that don't. And whether or not you learned it in med school or nursing school or wherever it is that you learned it, you're learning it now, and you're learning how to utilize it in practice.
Yeah.
So... like foundationally kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's been interesting because I've learned, I think I've learned a lot about the whole adoption process and what I've seen in terms of teaching people or convincing people that H.P.I is of value. That has been a very interesting.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. So I've heard you equate change as a grieving process and dealing with grief. And you know what? As soon as I heard that, I'm like, yes, because I've been in this space. I mean, I've led enhanced recovery, and you deal with everybody. And I've talked to a million people on the show, and it's grieving, anger.
Change is hard.
Change is hard.
Change is hard.
So tell me about that.
Well, someone asked me, I was like, what's it like to teach people how to do it? And then you look at those graphs of early adopters and
the Rogers adoption curve.
Yeah,
so
that sort of thing. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, well, that's not really what I saw when I first brought this in. Kind of like you said, because the first thing you do when you bring this one's different because it's more advanced and it's a little more complicated. And when you first drop it in the OR, folks are a little bit, they're scared that they're angry a little bit.
Why are you bringing this something in here
like, I don't need
taking away my ability
making
to make
this
decisions?
hard.
I used to have an expression. I'm an old guy. Back when I was younger and taller, I used to have an expression that there is an adaptation rule. I used to call it the 300-second rule. That if you bring a new thing, technique, tool, device into a setting where you have a routine baked into your daily schedule, and it takes more than 300 seconds to adopt that into your already established flow, it's likely not going to happen. Now, I'll modify that to between data and change is reality. And so unless there's an emotional tug to accept a 300-second threshold that is not sufficient, it is hard. And so speaking to the change management subject, if we understand that the downstream consequence of our efforts upstream are meaningful and impactful, then we're willing to invest in that upstream process.
Well, and the expectations are managed too, because the 300-second rule really applies when you have somebody coming and dumping something in your room to say, do this or use it, as opposed to, that's what happens. What's happened to me a lot in my career, that somebody else has made a decision to use something and they say, we're going live on, Tuesday, here it is, and use it. And it happens, it happens a lot. And so managing expectations, I think also makes that adjust.
But this thing is different because it takes longer than 300 seconds.
No, exactly.
But that's insane.
But the value proposition has to be equated to that fact early, and so we're saying the same thing. We're just saying the same thing differently. But I respect, and so back to home base, if you will, augmented intelligence and the advancement of the science that we're going to have to confront. I think we all of us who practice on a day-to-day basis have to understand. We have to be more sensitive to change management and the variables that contribute to successful change management and unsuccessful change management.
Well, and going back to the Kubler-Ross, for grieving.
Right.
So, one of the things you do when you're working with someone who is grieving is work through that process.
Yeah.
So,
that's what you have to, because for this one in particular, you drop it in. There's a huge denial piece of it.
Yeah.
Because
I don't need it.
I don't have a problem.
Exactly.
He's got a problem with hypotension, but mine don't.
Yeah.
Never. Yeah. And so there's the whole will it work that you have to get through. You have to demonstrate that it actually does work, and that takes longer. That takes not 300 seconds. That probably takes half dozen cases.
Yeah.
And then you got to say,
We just heard from Dr. Andy Shaw a few hours ago about some work that he has done in a retrospective data analysis, a very, very large data set. But what the take-home buzz was, nearly 25% of our patients are hypotensive by definition.
Yeah.
And so this is an endemic. This is
Absolutely.
a major moment of revelation.
Well, because I think in the past we've they're protected by the anesthesia, right? Because they don't need as much blood pressure when they're anesthetized.
So we think.
That's what we've been
told. So you have to get over that piece of it. So there's that huge component to it.
Simon Davies has been on Top Med Talk quite a bit and talked about his experience, and I've loved talking to him because he's like, it rolled in the OR, and I was like, negative, no way.
It's like, no way. Yeah.
And he's like, well, I guess I'll try it, and he saw that it was it was predicting hypotension.
Well, that's the problem. You also have to get over that. That I know this is going to happen.
Yeah,
it's like I don't need this machine.
Yeah. Interesting. I think it warrants a look and a second thought about it, because
it does.
It's
definitely
something that, as Saul said, an endemic. So Okay, we're going to have to wrap things up in here in just a second. But I could talk to you forever about this. Yeah. We're just getting going, aren't we?
That's what I thought, yeah.
Well, congratulations on your quasi-retirement.
Well, I'm not dead yet. I'm just not writing memos. That's all I get to. I'm getting to do. I'm getting to do other things, which has been the really nice piece of it.
All right, let me reframe.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your freedom.
It is.
There
it's like,
you go. So you actually do some really fun things.
Oh yeah, I get to. It's all right. It's great. I don't have to do the schedule. I don't have to. Yeah, memos, and I just take care of patients, and I do teaching, and I can even maybe get some writing done, and it's the coolest thing.
Neil, thanks again to all of our listeners out there. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Top Med Talk.
Nick Majerison here. Thanks for downloading Top Med Talk. Top Med Talk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. EBPOM has been advocating perioperative medicine for many years now, using the traditional conference circuit, where people have attended meetings from all over the world and heard some of the latest information. However, in the face of the COVID crisis, EBPOM took a bold decision. We've transposed the entire conferencing experience into an online experience. Carbon-friendly conferencing. The latest information, the latest talks, the hottest experts, the most incisive analysis, and even the socializing. We've got it all covered as EBPOM goes virtual. Hot on the heels of the huge success of EBPOM 2020 live from London, we're now headed towards EBPOM Chicago. Come aboard and be part of one of the most exciting developments in medicine since the stethoscope. EBPOM Chicago. Get yourself to ebpom.org now and guarantee yourself a place at one of the most exciting conferences in the world.